This is Wednesday, March 24th. This is American history. Now, if you are one of the people who are unable to be in class, like the baseball players, a reminder that the 5 questions you must do and submit for a grade. This is the walkout worksheet for today. The questions will not necessarily be over the material we are studying today. Well, we know on September the 1st, 1939, the Germans will invade Poland and World War II will begin. This here is a video that talks about the beginning of World War II from the English point of view. Now, of course, here is our map. This is Germany. This is Austria. This little part here would be the Sudetenland. This is Poland. And all of these areas have been taken over by the Germans. Now, we know that the English and the French have declared war on Germany. As of right now, the Soviet Union has signed a non-aggression pact. Well, after Poland fell, the French knew that the Germans were coming. And the best, easiest path for the Germans would be through the Rhine River Valley. Now, the French had figured this out at the end of World War I. They had begun to build an elaborate line of pillboxes and cannon emplacements called the Maginot Line. The French believed that it was impregnable, that the Germans could not succeed. As in World War I, German troops are going to bypass the Maginot Line and again attack through Belgium and Holland. Unlike World War I, the Germans will fly through France and they will capture Paris, and France will fall in less than 30 days. When Paris fell, the southern part of France is going to sue for peace. So France now is divided into the northern part, which we call occupied. Paris is part of that. And then the southern part, which is Vichy, V-I-C-H-Y. Now, the leaders of Vichy said that they would uphold German laws. If you remember, we watched a video a couple of days ago about a young lady who had suffered through the Kristallnacht and how her parents had sent her and her brother into southern France. And we heard them say that it was about this time that they left southern France for America. And they had to do this because the Vichy government would have told the Germans where all the Jews were. Great Britain had just begun to send troops to France when the war broke out. Now, the British are going to find that their men are still on the beaches when France is going to fall. Now, the question is, can the British survive if all of the British soldiers are captured? The British are going to ask all people who own yachts, pleasure cruises, to go to Dunkirk, which is off the coast of France, and to get as many soldiers as possible. Over 300,000 British troops are saved this way. It is after this that the Germans are going to begin contemplating how to defeat the British. The easiest way is to defeat the British Air Force, and then the German Air Force can attack British targets at will. This is what we call the Battle of Britain. Now, we need to put an asterisk next to the Battle of Britain. This is the first battle in human history where the entire war is fought in the air. This video here talks about that battle. Now, after the debacle of the Munich Conference, the British people are going to turn their backs on Neville Chamberlain, and Winston Churchill will become the new Prime Minister of Great Britain. Churchill is going to call for the U.S. to provide aid. Now, President Roosevelt wanted to provide aid. He felt that in time the Germans would attack us. Roosevelt is what we call an internationalist, someone who wants to get involved in European affairs. Now, we heard earlier that people like Charles Lindbergh and Charles Nye had formed the American First Committee, and these were people who were isolationists. Now, we're in the year 1940. Could the America First Committee garner enough people to vote Roosevelt out of office? Roosevelt is going to seek a third term. This is the first time that any American president has sought a third term for a national party. Well, what about the Republicans? The Republicans are going to turn to Wendell Willkie. This is Wendell Willkie right here. Wendell Willkie was a New Dealer during the first New Deal. Willkie and Roosevelt share common ideas on domestic affairs, but more importantly, Willkie also is an interventionist. And because of this, those who are part of the isolation movement have no one else to vote for. The red states are Mr. Roosevelt. The blue states are Mr. Willkie. Now, this is quite a shock from 1936 when Roosevelt won every state but one. Every state but two. Look at the popular votes. Roosevelt is much, much closer to 50% than he has been for the last two terms. Safely elected, Roosevelt is going to go to Congress and call Congress to create a Lend-Lease plan. Now, Lend-Lease will be with the British. We will lend out to the British destroyers, fast-moving ships that the British need to protect their convoys. The British will allow us to guard British possessions in the Atlantic and Caribbean Sea. This is a win-win for them. It allows us to garner more territory. In the summer of 1941, Roosevelt announces that he is going to go on vacation at Campobello, his home in what is now Maine. While at Campobello, an American destroyer will pick up Roosevelt, and they will go to Halifax, Canada. There, he will meet British Prime Minister Churchill. Roosevelt and Churchill at this time will come to an understanding that we call the Atlantic Charter. The Atlantic Charter says that the United States will do everything in its power to make sure that the British are supplied with weapons of war, to make sure that the British don't lose to the Germans. Roosevelt felt that if the British lost, there was no place we could safely launch an attack on the Germans once we got into the war. Roosevelt was convinced we were going to get into the war. In the summer of 1941, American naval ships will begin to shadow British convoys to ensure that the British convoys are not sunk. American supplies are being sent from Great Britain, but this is a dangerous game. It is only a matter of time before the Germans begin to sink American ships. In the fall of 1941, the USS Reuben James, a destroyer doing convoy duty, is going to be sunk by a German submarine. 115 American lives are lost. This is generally seen as the unofficial beginning of World War II between the Germans, Italians, and the United States. Well, of course, we know that the Japanese declared war on the United States on December 7th, and on December 8th, the United States declared war on Japan. The Germans and the Italians will declare war on the United States that same week, and America will declare war on the Germans and Italians before Christmas. By the end of 1941, the United States will be fighting in 2 oceans and 3 continents at the same time. No country in the history of the world had ever tried to do this. Now, you need to do your walkout worksheet. That's what's on next. Tomorrow, we're going to look at lesson 26, which is the war itself. Now again, my goal is to have a quiz on Wednesday, the 31st. If you know you can't make it, let me know. Have your parents contact me.